Hey guys, I'm back and wanted to do something really quick that I've wanted to have a quick video on before, and that is my homemade bread that I cheat with. And I'll explain why. The reason why I'm saying I'm cheating is because usually I'm multitasking like crazy, and I'm going to let my bread machine, which is what this is the pan for the bread machine, do a lot of the work. And then I can multitask and do all sorts of other things. Usually it's anything around the house, homeschooling, farming, all the things, kids, animals, etc. So, and since I have fresh, you guys, look, this isn't a strainer, it's dripping a little bit, but this is all that butter that I just made. And I'm going to use a little bit of that butter in my bread since I have it. It's either that or I was going to use the lard that we rendered from our pig that's in the fridge in a mason jar. So, super fast and easy way to make bread. There's no preservatives, really simple ingredients, nothing fancy about this bread. So, one caveat is that in the wintertime, since we heat primarily with our wood stove, it is really dry in our house, so I have to add a little extra water so the dough isn't too dry. So normally I would say 1 cup of water, but I'm going a little bit over. Maybe 1 1/4, maybe a little under. So I wish I could tell you an exact measurement, but just sometimes you got to go with the flow on bread. And the more times you make it, the more experience you will have, and you'll just be able to look at a dough and say, that's too dry, that's too wet, I need to add a little water, add a little flour. The other nice thing about this bread is it doesn't take anything fancy. I don't use bread flour. I have in the past. I honestly can't tell the difference. Maybe you could. Maybe you prefer to use bread flour. You definitely can, but I use regular old unbleached all-purpose flour. I think I'm using King Arthur right now. That's usually the brand that I use. So get started. I put my water first. And it's important to do this in the same order. So next up is, I would say, 2 to 3 teaspoons of salt. Very, very important. Do not use regular old iodized table salt. It has an anti-caking agent that actually will hurt your bread and it will not work. So use kosher salt, sea salt, canning salt, just not iodized table salt. So again, probably 2 to 3 teaspoons, but I've been doing this for so long, I just use it, measure into my hand because I have this recipe memorized. So I don't know if you can see that. Right in the warm water. Oh, again, very important not to use cold water. Use warm water. Probably less than you would a bathtub. I think the exact temperature is, around 110 degrees. Comment below if I'm wrong, because I probably am. But I'm eyeballing this. I will find the exact measurement of temperature if you really need it. But warm water is very important. Not too hot, because it will kill the yeast, but warm to inhibit the growth. All right, next up, sugar. This, again, is probably 2 tablespoons of sugar. But I have a big container of sugar in my pantry, but I also keep this little mason jar of sugar because there's sometimes that like this, like I don't want to bring a giant thing of sugar out. So I just, again, it's probably a couple tablespoons, but I know just by eyeballing it how much sugar to put in the lid of my sugar lid, and I just sprinkle it in. Maybe a little bit more. And this specific sugar that I'm using is just natural cane sugar. It's unbleached. or whatever they use to make the white sugar really, really, really white. I do use really, really, really white sugar because just cost reasons, but I also like to have some of the more natural stuff too. So baby steps, right? Okay, next up, we need some of our fat. So the nice thing about this recipe too is that the ingredient is really flexible on this as well. You need a fat, which could be butter. It could be oil. I've used olive oil before. I've used avocado oil. One of my also favorites that I use is lard. I really like using lard as well because I know exactly where it came from. It came from our pigs. We rendered it down right here on the countertop. So I've done that before too, but in this case, I have fresh butter. Why would you not use fresh butter? So I'm going to throw in roughly 1/4 of a cup of butter or your fat. And again, with this, I am eyeballing it. Maybe it's a little more than 1/4 of a cup, but that's not going to hurt anything. Okay, great. So now you have everything in there for the most part. And the next step is going to be flour. Next step is going to be flour, and that is going to take 3 cups of flour. Now, I've done just regular all-purpose flour. I've also substituted 1 of the 3 cups with whole wheat. You can do that as well. You could use several different types of flour. I haven't done this and experimented much with different flours. I should, because I'm very interested in some ancient grains, but I will get there. So here we go. I have a giant thing of flour down here because we use a lot of flour. And I'm just going to 1, 2, 3. Okay, perfect. Next up also is your yeast, and you're just gonna sprinkle that right on the top. The yeast, I buy it, and I don't even know if it's this brand that's in here right now because I buy it in a big pack and I just reuse my containers. If you're going on the packets that you find, if you have bulk yeast like this or even bigger, it's 2 1/4 teaspoons of yeast. Again, I eyeball it. I'm horrible. I know that baking is supposed to be more of a chemistry, but when you've been baking something over and over and over for so long, you can just be creative a little bit. So 1, 2, and 1/4 and a little pinch for extra because I just want to make sure. So that's it. I'm going to put this in the bread machine. I'll show you exactly what that looks like. Pardon my messy kitchen. And I will show you what the dough looks like when I take it out of here, because you can bake your bread in the bread machine. I can't stand it. It's got a goofy hole in the bottom of it. It doesn't fit in a bag. I take my dough. I have the setting where it's not going to bake it. I take the dough out. I spray with olive oil, one of my favorite baking pans, and I bake it in my oven because I want a loaf of bread that's a normal loaf of bread for many reasons. So stand by. All right, this is what my bread machine looks like. I really liked this one. I've had it for a while. It stays on my countertop at all times. Apparently the brand is KBS. Looks like this, and you can do a lot of things in here. I've done yogurt, I've done jam as well, but turns out more like a sauce, but it's still good. So I'm going to close this, and I want to use the leaven dough. So I don't it's raw, but I want to leaven it. And I'm going to do one quick next rise after I take it out and put it in the pan too. So I'm just going to go down to number 12. Okay, it'll take 1 hour and 24 minutes roughly, And then it's only about 35 minutes in the oven. So it's again, it's an hour and 24 minutes. I can do anything else. Now, if it were summertime and I'd be outside, I'd set an alarm on my phone or my watch or my phone too, so I didn't accidentally forget about it, because that's happened before and then I have a mess. So I'm just gonna hit, whoops, and you can kind of see what it does. Now there's recipes out there that you can use an egg in there. You can get creative with oats. I've done that before too, but this is my tried and true, very, very simple bread dough recipe. And since we are having so much homemade food tonight for supper, I figured it would be fantastic to have homemade bread to put our homemade butter on with the pork ribs that we are going to barbecue that we raised ourselves. And we'll probably have green beans too. So, more to come on this. Hey everyone, so I'm back with my bread dough, and I just wanted to show you the process that I use for the dough. So first what I'm going to do is I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit of flour on a clean countertop. And this is what the dough looks like right out of the bread machine. And I'm going to make sure my hands have some on there, because the dough is a little sticky sometimes. Oops. And I'm just going to take this beautiful dough. It's perfect. This dough out, and I'm going to, essentially what you probably heard people say is punch the bread dough down, because I want to remove as much as I can of those air bubbles so they don't come out in the dough. The big air bubbles at least. So all I do, so all I do is, now that I have this here, is I'm going to prepare my bread dough pan, or my bread pan, I should say. And then I will show you what I use for my oil. It is kind of handy. The tools that I use, I will show you what tools that I use for this part of the recipe. One of the things that I've recently discovered, and it is kind of a mess right now, is these manual pump sprayers. You can fill it up with any kind of oil that you want in there. I have olive oil in here, and you just literally pressurize it using a pump, and then you can spray it very easily anywhere you want, and you don't have all those nasty chemicals. So I'm just gonna spray my pan, and it doesn't come out as fine of mist. So I usually just take a little pastry brush and make sure. And I love, love, love these pans. USA pan. Is it? Yep, USA pan. I think I got them on Amazon a long time ago. I use them a lot. It's just your standard, but they're pretty heavy duty. So now that I have that oiled, I'm going to set that off to the side. And I'm just going to roll and form the dough in the shape of a loaf. And then I'm going to take my pan, and I'm just going to easily place that right in here. It looks really great now. Okay, now what we are going to do, the portion of the recipe, is all I'm going to do, and this is just stained from straining things, it's very clean, I promise you, is I'm going to put a tea towel. I use tea towels a lot, or some people call them a flour sack towel. I'm going to take that and I'm going to place it in over my pan until it is roughly doubled in size. Now this is going to make a really big loaf of dough. You could probably use this for 2 loaf pans, but we like bread. So I'm just going to clean up my mess here, let it rise until it is roughly doubled in size, maybe a little bit less since it's such a big piece of dough. And then I am going to preheat my oven to 325 convection, or if you don't have a convection oven, 350 in a regular standard oven. And I'm going to bake it for about 30 minutes, sometimes 35 minutes. Usually what I'm doing at the very, very end to make sure that it's done is I'm taking my kitchen thermometer and I'm testing the center of the dough to see if it's at 190 degrees. That is when you know for sure that the bread dough is not, or the bread, I should say, the bread is finished and it's not going to be doughy or uncooked in the middle. So off we go. So now that we have the bread covered, we are going to let it sit until it roughly doubles in size. It should take about a half hour or so. Here it is. I'm going to score the top with a serrated sharp knife. This will help the bread form evenly with less air pockets in the oven. Looks pretty good so far. Roughly 30 to 35 minutes later, when the internal temperature reaches 190 degrees, you will have a beautiful loaf of bread. Thank you so much for joining me today here in my kitchen and on my farm. Have a great day.